We are back by popular demand to learn SolidWorks in 5 minutes. If you remember from all of our original episodes, we go File, New, Part, hit OK. Now then we can go down here, one of our viewers taught us this, to millimeters, inches where it says, and you can simply just choose inches, pounds, millimeters. I'm going to go with inches. So that's what we're going to be using for this lesson. So guys, please don't complain about the fact that I'm doing it in inches. We have a lot of US viewers here, so stick with me. It doesn't matter what you do it in. So now that we have a blank page for our new part, remember we're going to go front plane, we're going to go sketch. We now have our sketch open and ready to draw. I'm going to draw a box, just like that. And if we look here, you can see that we have different types of boxes. We can go corner rectangle if we had wanted, and that, remember, we're picking the origin to lock, and you can see it draws the box from the corner and locks it into that origin. But I prefer the center. Then we're going to go smart dimensions, 2 inches on this one, 2 inches on this one. You know what? Let's go 6 inches by 4. I'm going to do something different. 6 inches by 4. Zoom out a little bit. So remember, this is just a 2D sketch, so there's no thickness to it. So our next step, without closing sketch, we're going to go here to Feature, and we're going to go Extruded Boss Base. You only really have 2 choices the first time out. And then we're going to make it 0.5 inches thick. And we're going to hit the check mark or OK. And you can see we now have a flat plate. If you like what you've been learning so far, please be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, give me a thumbs up, and leave your comments below. I'm going to be giving you all kinds of SolidWorks tutorials and teaching you how to invent products easily. So, suppose we want to first make this plate hollow. We have a couple of options here. The easiest one to do is just sit here, select that face by right-clicking on it. We'll hit Sketch. We're going to go back to our center square. And we can do this, and then we can dimension 1/2 inch on each side. Oh, missed that. 1/2 inch on each side. Now you can see we have a square. There's also another way we can do this, so watch this. Let's just back out of this. Let's select this plane, hit Sketch. We're going to select this line. We're also going to select this line, and this line. Then we're going to hit Offset Pattern. And you can see that it's now taking those lines and offsetting them by 1/2 inch. But it's on the outside. We want to reverse that. And that's a quick way that you can do this. Now you see that. So now we have that same box, but we can easily change this dimension, 0.375. And you see it changes all the sides. Put it back at 0.5. Now, what we're going to do is we want to cut into this box. So we go Features, Extruded Cut. Now, this I have been asked about. If you go blind, it's the dimension that you select. So obviously if we go 0.5, we're still cut right through to the bottom. So we'll do 0.25, and then we'll hit OK. And we can select this tool, change the plane. And you see that? I've showed you this feature before, but this is a really handy tool to use so you can see it. If we select it again, it goes off. We can change which view we want, and then we can drag it through, as you see there. And then once we hit OK, it'll stay that way while we're working. And then we just hit here, and it goes away. But let's back out of this because I want to show you a different way of cutting. So suppose we want to cut through, but not all the way through. As I showed you, we can just simply do the feature, extruded cut, 0.25 inches, call it a day. But we may want to change this later, and we may want to tie to another dimension. So there's another way of doing this. We can go Features, Extruded Cut, and we can go from the sketch plane, but we're going to offset from surface. Now we're going to select the back surface, and we're just going to change that to 0.125. And I think you can already see what's happening here. You see that? And if we hit OK, basically it did the same thing. But now, watch what happens when I make this entire part thicker. Remember, we went up and we made the boss here, so we right-click, Edit Feature. Now I want to make this an inch thick. But look what happens. The dimension for the cut still leaves that 1/8 inch back piece. Had we done it the normal way where we just went down 3/8 of an inch, the problem is we would have to change that dimension too. But you can see it's now tied to that back plate. In the case of this design, it might have been a critical dimension, so this is a good way to go. Now that concludes the end of the 5-minute portion of this video. But because so many of you guys were wanting more information and others wanted to keep it down to 5 minutes, you could choose to stop here or continue on and learn more. So let's add a few more things to this. We can go to Features here again, and we can look for fillets. And then we can simply say we want, let's call 1/4 inch fillets, 0.25. And we're just going to select the edges, 0.25, 0.25, 0.25. Actually, I'm going to make them a little thicker, make them 0.5, because then, now you know this took me a long time to learn, but since our wall thickness is actually a 1/2 inch, this is going to be the correct inside fillet because this is the center of that 1/2 inch fillet. So we may want to even go further, and let's just say 0.75, which is a pretty big fillet, but watch. Then on the inside, we do another fillet, 0.25. So we're going to go here, and here, 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 and here. We hit OK. Now when you look at this, you can see that the thickness maintains the same width all the way around the part. So remember, when you're doing outside fillets, to compensate for the thickness of the wall, and it'll look a lot nicer. Now this part's kind of round, but we're not really designing anything in particular. We're just doing some features to learn how to do things. So let's get back to this. Now suppose we wanted to put some threaded holes in this design. Once we open this sketch, we're going to need some lines to tell us where our threaded holes are going to go. We can draw what are called center lines. Center lines are basically dotted lines that don't have anything to do with your sketch other than for reference. So let's see what that looks like. So we're going to go to our line tool up here, and we're going to select the second one, which is center line. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to make, and actually what we should do is do it a little different because that was in one direction. Let's go with midpoint line. Watch this. We're going to come here. We're going to hit escape to get out of that. We're going to come here and we're going to draw another one. Now the problem, and you can see they're automatically perpendicular. The problem is that these lines are actually drawing lines and used in sketching. So we need to select this box for construction. And we do that by clicking on a line, the properties come up for construction. Now you can see they're dotted, which means it won't care about those lines when it comes to actually cutting and extruding and doing all the other stuff. So that's what we use our center lines for, just for dimensions and references. So now that we have our reference lines, what we're going to do is we're going to exit the sketch, and then we're going to go Features, and then we're going to look for Hole Wizard. Now the Hole Wizard gives us all kinds of selections. So remember, I said I want to do threaded holes. So we're going to look for threaded holes, which are right here. A tapped hole. I'm going to use a number 8, so we'll move it up. And then we can go through all, which obviously means that we're going to go through with the tapped hole. But let's not do that. We know the part's now 1 inch thick, so let's go 3/4. So we're going to go blind. We're going to go 0.75. Now this is how far the threaded hole goes down. I'm going to change this to 0.5 because that's pretty easy to get. You still have a 1/4 inch difference between the 0.75 and the 1/2 inch hole. So we're going to do thread call out. We're just going to leave it like that. Near sink should be okay. So the near side countersink is just a deburring around the edge of the drilled hole so that it's easy to start the tap and also the screw once it's completed. So let's watch what happens. So we have our 4 reference points that we used here. We can now call out these. We go to positions, we select this surface, and look what happens. We're going to put this pencil right on that dot. And there we go. And we hit OK. Now you see our threaded holes. Now on purpose I did this. I never dimensioned these lines because I want to show you. You just go back, hit Edit Sketch, Smart Dimension, and we're just going to edit these lines so that they're in the center. 3.5, and this one's obviously going to be 5.5. And you can see now they're black because if you remember before, watch. If I just, now they're blue, which means that we can drag here. If I grab that line, if I can grab that line, see, it's not dimensioned properly. So go back to Smart Dimension, 5.5, there you go, Exit Sketch. So these are the exact dimension needed for a number 832 threaded hole. So you don't have to worry about it beyond this. When it goes to making this part, the machinist will see it and know exactly what to do. So you don't even have to worry about it from here. It's called out, it's good to go. Now there are ways to show the thread, but anymore, as parts get more and more complicated, I don't recommend doing it. You're better off getting used to the fact that you don't actually see the threads because it's easier on the processor for the graphics. So don't worry about it, especially when you're doing complicated parts like my dive light over there. You really don't want to start showing all the threaded holes. It also depends on your processing power of your computer. So let's get back to this. So another way we can do this, and here's another feature I haven't shown you. Watch this. See this line here? We can move this line up, and now those holes disappear. If we want them back, we just drag the line back. Now keep in mind that this is done in order, so anything at the end obviously is going to have to disappear with it. So if you want individual things to go away, watch how we do that. You can go up to the tap hole, right-click on it, and then you look for the one that says suppressed and make it disappear. If you want that sketch to disappear, you can do that individually also. You can do the same for the fillets. Let's do the inside fillets. We'll suppress them, and you see now they disappear, but they're still there. We can also leave other things in between, so suppress, and you notice the fillets are still on the outside and also the box, but let's put it back. And there we are. So we're going to move our line up, and I'm going to show you another way to do some tapped holes. So let's go back to this surface, select Sketch. We're going to draw our centerline box. We're going to go into the center. It's now locked on the center. We're going to avoid that edge, and then we're going to hit for construction. Don't forget to do that. And then we're going to go Smart Dimensions. And we know this is a 1/2 inch. Let me show you a little trick. Just if you want to lock it so you don't do dimensions. You go here and here, hit escape to release the line. You can also, I don't get used to it, but you can hold the mouse down and do it. I tend to forget. I'm just used to doing it this way. So watch this. Did you see that light up a second ago? We had a center line. Well, there's also a center line here. If we add a little dot, for some reason you can't really do this any other way, you add a little dot to there. Now we go to Add Relations. So watch this, Add Relations. And we're going to hit that dot that is locked onto that line. And we're going to hit there. So we have the dot and this line, and we're going to select midpoint. Now look at that. Now we're always locked in there on the midpoint, and we can do the same thing over here. Hopefully I'll get it right. So we go midpoint. That little dot is on that midpoint, and then we're going to hit OK. We're going to go add relations. We're going to select this line, and we're going to hit that line again, 0.20. See line 1, 0.20, midpoint, and there you go. Now, this is something to keep in mind with any program you're using, whether it's Solidworks, Fusion 360, any parametric program like this. You want to avoid as many dimensions as you can and use those relations. By doing this, if you make a mistake, it's easy to change it because then you only have one dimension to change and everything else will change with it. If you dimension every little thing without doing it this way, what's going to happen is you're going to have to go back and manually change every single dimension. And you want to avoid doing that because believe me, while you're designing things, you're going to have to make changes. So let's take a look again. So now we have this line that goes nicely around the entire box. There's a couple of things we can do here. So one thing is we can now start calling out more dots. So we could put a dot here, put a dot here. Now remember, we just said go add relation. I'm going to at that point select it. I'm going to select this point and I'm going to select this line and I'm going to go symmetric. Now keep this in mind, symmetry always occurs around a line or an edge. So you have to make sure you select a line in the center and then your points on each side. And they pretty much have to be the same thing on both sides. And obviously symmetry means that it's always going to follow that center. So watch, smart dimensions. We're going to go here to here. We can do 3 inches. And you see there it's nice and centered. Or watch this. We could have also done smart dimensions there to that line, 1.5. And let's just take a look. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's not bad at all, right? So, but notice this one is automatically locked to this dimension. If I make it 1, the other one's going to move. If I make it 1.5, it's going to move as well. So now we have 2 there, and we have 1 on this side. We can go over to the other side and add another one, but I'm going to show you another little trick. I don't particularly like doing this, but it does work. We could take a center line, we can put it here, we can go mirror entities, we can select this dot, we can mirror about that line, and it should throw a dot on the other side. We can do the same for the top. So go center line, go here, we can select mirror entities, 1, 2, 3, mirror about that line, and hit OK. And there you go. Now remember we talked about dimensioning. Because this one line is a reference line, the one here, you don't have to dimension it. It's just floating in space and it's not used in any kind of actual building of the part. It's just so we know where everything else is mirrored in this case. Okay, so we select OK. We're going to exit the sketch. We're going to go back up to our feature, select Hole Wizard. We already had those other ones, but we erased them. So now we go position. We're going to say we're going to do it on this surface. It gives us 1 here, 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 and here. And I'm not going to do these, and I'll show you why. So we could have gone around the whole thing, but I'm trying to teach you guys a lot of neat tricks in this episode. Because if you watch the first 10, you should have an idea of what I'm doing by now. So I'm just showing you how to improve the way you design. So watch this. Just like we are able to mirror a sketch, we can also mirror features. So we go mirror, and now we're in features, not sketch. This is a different mirror. And we're going to mirror about a face or a plane, a 3D dimension, not that line. And we are going to select our top plane. And look what happens. It's selecting these three and automatically going over here. We then hit OK, and there you go. But we still have to do this one, so we hit mirror again. Now we're going to do this other plane. You see this, right? So it's this screw. Think of it sort of like a ping pong ball table or a tennis court. This screw is going to be over this fence on the exact other side. And then there you go, hit OK, and look at that. So now we have threaded holes. I'm going to get into this in future episodes, but there's one thing to know about the way I'm teaching you this. All these parts that I'm drawing are CNC machinable. This part is not just 3D printable. Because the fillets are here, and let's take a look at that, we are able to machine this. So let's look at that closer. How would I machine this box? Well, I would take a solid chunk of aluminum. I would have to mount it on the bottom somehow. If there's no holes or anything, what they would do is they would simply take, and I'm just drawing this so you understand what I'm doing. We draw a box. We go to display relations, add display, oh, shoot. We go to add relation. We want that line and that line to be collinear. This line and this line to be collinear. There we have it. Now we're going to exit, and there you go. And this is really how they would make it in a CNC machine. So, and look, we have all these lines bothering us, so let's do this. Let's go up, find that sketch, and we can just go hide. You don't want to suppress that because it's used as a reference, so make sure you hide it so you can't see it, but it's not suppressed because the sketch is being used in the entire model. So keep that in mind. Suppress is different than hide. So this is what they would actually build to machine it. So they would hold it in the vise. They would cut all this stuff, drill your holes, tap them, do this inside fillet, and yes, this is machinable. Let me show you something that is not machinable. If we went and we got rid of these, so if we just suppress these, we can no longer machine this part. Do you know why? Well, think about it. A cutting tool is circular, and you need a certain amount of thickness to that tool, which means you need a radius. So in order to cut inside cuts like that, the part is always going to have a curve in it. So keep that in mind. So you can't do this simply. We just took a very simple part to make and made it really expensive. And remember, we don't want to do that. It's about making the simplest parts possible for our inventions. Put that fillet back in. Unsuppress, there you go. And remember, this is a nice 1/4 inch radius, which means we can use a 1/2 inch cutting tool, which is really good because they're fast, they're cheap, we won't have any problems, especially if we're cutting this out of aluminum. So let's get back to this part and look at what we're going to do. So we've cut it, we have nice CNC machinable edges, the outside isn't a problem. Oh, and watch this. I forgot to tell you, unlike the inside feature, the outside is machinable as a square because remember, the cutting tool can go outside and then go down the other edge and come back around and cut that without problem because there's no inside radiuses. Inside radiuses are the only thing that's a problem with CNC. So let's put that back as well. All right, so we've machined this part. They're going to turn it over. And then they're literally just going to come and shave this off with an end mill or a fly cutter. They'll flip it over by hand, stick it in the vise, close the vise up, and shave it off. No big deal. So let's get rid of that. Now there are other things that we could do to improve the design of this part, but I just, for this video, wanted you guys to get an idea of how you can get started making some of these first parts. They're not complicated. Now I use Solidworks, but you can use Fusion 360. They're both really good at designing these types of parts. But keep in mind, you need to be thinking about the manufacturing process as you're doing the design. And it's very similar to what I showed you here, where you have to worry about cutting tools or the manufacturing processes involved. Now this was a very simple and quick part that we were able to design, and I'm going to save it because we're going to go on and do some other things in the next episode.